name is Sharon Baglios, and I am the Assistant Director for Outreach here at Lutheran Immigration and Refugee Service. Please join us as we pray. Almighty and loving God, your steadfast love and mighty grace have no limit. You are light and nourishment to your children. Your grace surpasses culture, language, and nationality. Stir in us the spirit of accompaniment and compassion so that we can walk with refugees, immigrants, and all our brothers and sisters of color. Be our light on the way of love. Amen.
Sharon, thank you so much for that beautiful prayer. And thank you all for joining us for our webinar to launch LIRS's new fall program, Gather Afghanistan 2020. My name is Whitney Palmer, and I am the Program Manager for Outreach. We are so excited to share this new program with you. LIRS and our amazing service partners get to work with people from all over the world, from many different countries and regions. Each year, Gather will focus on one of these places. And to start, Gather 2020 is all about Afghanistan. Together, we will learn about the history of conflict, why there are refugees, explore the beautiful culture through worship, food, and music, and get to know a very special family from one of LIRS's workforce development and integration programs. In today's webinar, we are going to share with you a little bit about the history of Afghanistan and some really important information and policy updates from our advocacy team. Then we will introduce you to the Abdullah family, who have generously shared with us a part of their story. Next, we will go over the details of our Gather Afghanistan 2020 toolkits and show you some of the great ways you can use them with your congregations, friends, and family. A few housekeeping notes before we get into the webinar. If you are having trouble hearing the audio from your computer, you can also dial in to the number you see on your screen and hear the audio through your phone. We are recording the webinar, so it will be available to everyone on our website. We will have a question and answer segment towards the end of the webinar, so you can ask questions using the chat function. And at the end, we will group questions together and answer them. Now I will hand it over to Sue Ellen Spots, who will give us an introduction to Afghanistan.
Thank you, Whitney. For Gather Afghanistan 2020, LIRS is looking at the complex and rich history of the country. As we seek to understand the refugee crisis in Afghanistan, we will give some special focus to our 2021 annual theme, Honoring Women and Girls. So let's explore together some of the key moments in the history of Afghanistan that have and continue to push people to seek safety outside their homeland. Afghans have been fleeing the violence in their home country and seeking refuge and protection for more than 40 years. The Soviet Union invaded Afghanistan in 1979, starting off decades of successive waves of violence and aggression from both internal and external forces. Taliban rule in the late 1990s and early 2000s, and the aftermath of the fall of the Taliban regime led to additional outbreaks of violence in the country. In 1996, the Taliban was formed to counter the Soviet occupation of Afghanistan of the 1980s. And though they sought to impose stability and rule of law, they neglected social services, and they imposed strict justice based in pre-Islamic tribal code and interpretations of Sharia law. These strict rules required women to be covered from head to toe, and jailed men whose beards they deemed to be too short. Following the 9/11 attacks in New York City, the United States declared its war on terrorism and sent troops to Afghanistan to help dismantle the Taliban. Despite billions of dollars and years of effort, the political unrest, internal conflict, and the presence of US troops in Afghanistan continue to this day. Women and children face even more challenges in times of crisis. During Taliban rule, women were not allowed to receive education or to work, and they could not leave their homes without a male chaperone. There are many reports of Taliban officials kidnapping women to sell them into forced prostitution. And though some would say the safety and rights of women have improved over the last few years, reports of domestic violence against women continue. Today, there are nearly 2.5 million registered refugees from Afghanistan who are fleeing violence and waiting for protection and a chance to rebuild their lives. Many of them are everyday citizens who are looking for a safe place to call home. And many others served alongside the United States. Afghanistan people continue to be displaced internally by disasters as well, such as the floods that occurred this week. Such internal displacement may result in more people seeking a new home as refugees. Now to explain how you can be an advocate on behalf of Afghan refugees is Diana Gillespie from the LIRS Advocacy Office.
Thank you, Sue Ellen, for that great background of Afghanistan and also of U.S. involvement in Afghanistan. As my colleague Sue Ellen mentioned, this has also led to policy being established to protect vulnerable populations in that country. And one of those groups are Afghan Special Immigrant Visa Holders, or SIVs, as they're known for short. So in 2009, Congress passed the Afghan Allies Protection Act with broad bipartisan support, and this established the Afghan Special Immigrant Visa Program. So this program provides a path to safety for Afghans who've worked for the US government alongside US forces, diplomats, and other government personnel. There are thousands of Afghan nationals that provide crucial services. And I've listed some of these on the slide, just such as interpretation, translation, advice on political and cultural affairs. But there are many other ways that they serve alongside our troops. And just as a personal note, one of my site visits with our partners, I met a gentleman who was a cook for our troops in Afghanistan. So again, there's several ways that they serve, but I've noted a few here on the slide. So unfortunately, these allies and their families can sometimes become targets of anti-American violence. And so they're threatened, they could be abducted or even killed for their work with the US mission. And so again, the SIV program is meant to provide a path to safety for those who face serious and ongoing threats because of their work. And Afghans can apply for a special immigrant visa under this program and be granted a visa as long as they meet all of the conditions or qualifications. And so many veterans here credit Afghan allies with saving their lives, and military leaders have also highlighted that this program is of high national security interest. And so just one last note to make on SIVs is that they are processed through the broader US Refugee Admissions Program. And I'll tell you a little bit about, again, what's happening with this program and how you can take action just as we click to the next slide here. So over the last few years, the US Refugee Admissions Program has resettled fewer and fewer refugees, leading to longer waiting periods for refugees and just longer waiting in general of refugees being able to reunite with family members that are still waiting in refugee camps. And so some of you may know that this year in 2020, the president set a historic low refugee admissions goal of 18,000. And to give you some context, the average since this U.S. Refugee Admissions Program started has been 95,000, refugee admissions goal of 95,000. So this year we are at 18,000. But we're just a month away from this fiscal year ending, and we've just resettled just over 8,000 refugees. So we're approaching a critical time when the president is expected to announce the refugee admissions goal for the next year, 2021. And this usually happens around September 30th, which is the end of the fiscal year. So we just want to make sure that you're familiar with the actions that you can take to express your support for refugees. And there's a couple ways I'll highlight here, and also lead you to a toolkit which will provide all the resources you'll need. So first, we encourage you to contact your members of Congress now and send them a letter or an email message, again, expressing your support for refugee admissions. We have template letters and messages that can get you started on this, but any kind of personal note that you can include with these messages are of great interest to your members of Congress. And so they prefer to hear personalized notes rather than template letters. So we encourage you to just insert a personal note in there. And second, you can ask your state and local elected leaders to sign on to a Welcoming Refugees 2021 letter. And so this is an annual sign-on letter that LIRS has launched a few weeks ago. It gives, again, state level officials an opportunity to express their support for refugees in their community. Last year, we were able to obtain over 400 signatures, and these signatures came from governors, mayors, council members, county officials. So anyone at the state level, we encourage you to get them to sign on. We'll deliver this letter to the President and Secretary Pompeo, again, as they're considering the refugee admissions goal for the following year. And so the templates and the messages that I've mentioned for both of these actions can actually be found in our Welcoming Refugees 2021 toolkit. And this toolkit is posted online at lirs.org/advocate. And it's a downloadable 2-page, very simple and straight to the point resource for you to use. I'm happy to answer any questions about anything I covered during the end at the question and answer session. So I'll turn it back over to Whitney.
Thank you so much, Diana, for those really important advocacy updates and for sharing with us some tangible ways that we can support refugees during these challenging times. As a reminder, if you have any questions at all during the webinar, please type them into the chat box and we will do our best to answer them during the Q&A session at the end of our webinar. So together we've learned a little bit about Afghanistan and why we have Afghan refugees seeking safety in the United States. Now we would like to introduce you to a special family that we, along with our partner, helped resettle in February of 2019. The Abdullah family was enrolled in our Refugee Youth Career Pathways program, which is a special partnership with the Office of Refugee Resettlement in the US government and with support from the Starbucks Foundation. So now let's check out their video.
For someone who just starts, it's so difficult and different. It feels like you're in another world.
This is just start of a new life.
They're coming halfway across the world to a completely foreign place. Many of them have aged out of their schools, and so the question is, after high school, what's next? And so our hope is that if we can provide some support in terms of understanding local resources, that we can get them headed on the right path.
most of our refugee programs are like for adults. So this is the only program that's like concentrate on adults like between 16 and 24. Starbucks ready to hire Abdullah. So he's working right now there. On the top of that, he's attending computer class.
If you have a good education, you know you will have a good future.
I'm planning to apply to University of Maryland, and after graduation, I want to apply to law school.
I'm planning to become an environmental engineer. It helps me to do something for this earth.
They say if you make the mistakes, you can make it anywhere in the world. So we're trying to make it here.
So as part of our Gather Afghanistan 2020 program, the Abdullah family has generously shared a little bit more about their experience. You can check out our 2 toolkits for a deeper look into what it was like for them to transition to the United States. So we've been introduced to LIRS's new annual fall program, Gather. We learned a bit from Sue Ellen about the history of conflict in Afghanistan, why there are Afghan refugees seeking safety in the United States and elsewhere, and how women and girls experience different and often more intense levels of trauma during times of crisis and war. We heard from Diana about some of the policies that are affecting special immigrant visas and the important steps that we can take to support refugees with actions around the presidential determination. We were introduced to the Abdullah family and learned more about the ways that LIRS and our partners support families as they resettle to the United States. So now let's really get into what you can do to dive even deeper into Gather Afghanistan 2020. As previously mentioned, our Gather program equips families, congregations, and community groups with tools to learn about the history of conflict in Afghanistan, explore the culture through worship, food, and music, and learn more about LIRS's work with the Abdullah family and others. We do that through 2 comprehensive and engaging toolkits. Following our favorite program acronym, ADAPT, each toolkit will provide resources on how to act, host a Gather event for your congregation, community, or family, donate to support resettlement and integration programs for families like the Abdullahs, advocate, take action to advocate for a higher number of refugees for the presidential determination. Pray, join us and hundreds of others across the country as we pray and petition for refugees, migrants, and the country of Afghanistan. And finally, to teach, to dig even deeper personally and share with others about what you learned today. Though there is some overlap with the toolkits, each is really geared for a different audience. The first toolkit is designed for faith community leaders, pastors, small group leaders, and others who would like to share this with their faith communities. In this toolkit, the ACT guide will prepare you to dedicate a congregational or small group worship or study to Gather Afghanistan 2020. You will find sample orders of worship, commentaries on scripture, weekly prayers, hymns, and a very special prayer written by an Afghan immigrant, and a litany written specifically for this program. The second toolkit is designed for households and communities and guides them through hosting a dinner with background music selections to specially curated menus with recipes for cooking and hosting a traditional Afghan meal, and discussion questions to facilitate engaging conversation with your family and friends. Each toolkit also provides additional resources to engage individuals who want to go even deeper in their understanding of the conflict and culture of Afghanistan. And we even have some great suggestions for how to engage young families and their children in the discussion about what our refugee and immigrant brothers and sisters experience. We know that this year has been challenging. We cannot truly gather together in the ways that we used to. We recognize and have felt our own isolation, uncertainty, and even some frustration with the past few months. But we also know that despite the challenges we continue to face, we remain committed to honoring the journey of our migrant and refugee brothers and sisters. Plus, we think this program is a really fun way to spend an evening eating amazing food, listening to beautiful music, and having interesting discussion with your friends, family, and congregation. So if you're interested in hosting a Gather Afghanistan 2020 event with your congregation, community, or family, we will be officially launching the program on Tuesday, September 1st. And it will be available through the end of October. You can find out more on our website by keeping an eye on your email and checking out our Facebook page. Now I will hand it back to Sharon, who will share some other exciting programs and resources available from LIRS.
Thanks, Whitney. As part of our Gather Afghanistan 2020 program, we are excited to partner with Humaira Gilzai of Afghan Culture Unveiled to host a special cooking demonstration and interview. Prior to this exclusive event, folks who register will receive a grocery list so they can follow along as Humaira prepares some authentic Afghan food, tells her story about her life as an Afghan refugee, and shares her passion for Afghan culture. Thousands of families flee violence and persecution from their home countries across the globe for the protection of America. However, when they arrive at our borders, many find shackles, not safety. This year, LIRS celebrates its 6th annual Hope for the Holidays winter program. With the support of our hundreds of partners across the country, we collect donations for gifts and handwritten holiday cards to share hope with our friends in immigration detention and to remind them that they are not forgotten during the holiday season. This year is especially important. COVID-19 intensified the isolation that immigrants experience by indefinitely postponing visits from their families and from volunteers in their communities. Stay tuned as we get ready to launch our 2020 Hope for the Holidays winter program, launching this November. Our newest Bible study, Transformed Communities, is now available on our website. Developed in partnership with Lutheran Outdoor Ministry, this study equips participants to explore their relationship with immigrants, refugees, and asylum seekers in relation to biblical stories of generosity, inclusion, compassion, justice, and forgiveness. Check out lirs.org and head over to our resource section to download your own copy of Transformed Communities.
Thank you so much, Sharon, for those exciting resources and programs that Outreach has available for everybody. So now we'll go ahead and move on to the question and answer portion of our webinar. Again, if you guys have more questions, we have a good amount of time and want to make sure that we answer as many questions as you guys have. And if we don't have the answers right now, we are definitely planning on getting those for you, and we will follow up in an email. All right, so our first question is regarding the US role in Taliban rule. Diana, I'm not sure if you have any information on that. That's definitely something we can follow up on. But also in our toolkit, there's a really, really great resource. So if you download either one of our toolkits, in the Teach section, there is some additional learning that has a really, really, really excellent timeline of the US role through Afghanistan, basically since we started getting involved. So I don't think we're able to answer that right now, but I would definitely encourage you to look at our toolkit and check out that resource. It's under our Teach section. Our next question, in fiscal year 2020, how many of the refugees admitted under the 18,000 cap have been SIV refugees? Diana, are you able to explain a little bit?
Sure. And then maybe just to clarify, so the SIVs, because they're part of this special category, they're not included in the cap. But I could tell you that so far this year, we've had just over 2,000 Afghani SIVs arrive. And to give you maybe some context for that, we can really admit anywhere from 10 to 14,000 SIVs a year. And so, you know, I should say, like, yes, SIVs had been arriving more consistently prior to COVID. And, you know, COVID paused a lot of that. But even in previous years, you know, we were not maximizing all of these visas for SIVs when we knew there was a group waiting that had already been approved for visas.
Yeah, thank you, Diana. I know we've had around 8,000 SIVs come in so far this year as of recent numbers in August, and they are separate. The next
and Whitney, maybe I can also clarify. So there are many groups under an SIV category. Afghans are one of them. There are also Iraqis that can qualify for SIV. So I know that this kind of gets into the weed, but when we throw around a lot of numbers, I just want to make sure people understand each group has a different, you know, set of figures. And yeah.
Yeah, thank you for the clarification. It does get very complicated. So the next question, how many refugees would the United States be able to annually support, including all basic needs, job, language skills, housing, food, transportation, education, health, physical, spiritual needs, very holistic care. I love that. And how are they spread around the country, and what is their settlement based on?
I can begin to answer this, but I think that my colleagues in the programs department would do a much better job. But I can tell you that, as I mentioned, historically, you know, well, even the very first year of the U.S. Refugee Admissions Program back in 1980, under the Reagan administration, we resettled as many as 200,000 refugees in 1 year. Again, that was a time when there was a great need to bring refugees from the Southeast Asian region. And that's about the most we've ever brought. And right now, we're facing, you know, one of the highest levels of global displacement on record, surpasses our record of displacement during World War II. And so, you know, again, I think that our partners across the country, and this is not just LIRS doing this work, but there are at least 8 other resettlement agencies that we collaborate with to ensure that refugees are able to, you know, be resettled and integrated in any state that they're arriving. And so, you know, I think we have a very, you know, high level or high capacity to be able to resettle them. Now, we have not been resettling them in those numbers recently, and that's due to, you know, the lowering of the refugee admissions goal each year for the last 4 years. But there have also been, you know, other countries, you know, that have kept their refugee admissions goals static or even lowered them too, because remember the US used to be the leader of refugee admissions, and as US has lowered refugee admissions, other countries have chosen to do the same too. So that's one of the reasons why we see longer waiting periods. And then what is their how are they spread around the country? What is their settlement based on? That's where I feel like our programs colleagues could answer a little bit, but I know that there's a lot taken into consideration in terms of like where they would be best supported as a family or yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Diana. Just to add a few more things. Refugee resettlement in the United States is a private-public partnership, so the US government does a lot to help resettle refugees, but we also really rely on our service partners who are nonprofit organizations, and we rely really heavily on volunteers and the communities. So we have a ton of community partnerships with congregations, with employment agencies, with schools, and all of that goes into how many refugees we are able to resettle, and also really how successful the integration and resettlement process is. So really our capacity is big, but we need our communities and our volunteers and everybody in the country really to be on board and to be excited about working with refugees. So our next question is, how has COVID affected the number of refugees coming to the United States this year?
Yeah, so, well, as all of you know, COVID has affected, you know, all of us. You know, some of us were stuck in other countries and we're stuck in this one, but you know, with that, you know, pause in air travel, you know, that really affected the ability for, you know, refugees who had been approved to fly and be resettled here, you know, to basically be put on hold. And so just as everyone else, it was paused for some time. And, you know, our hope is that now as airlines are starting to resume, you know, operations and countries are finding ways, you know, to maintain everyone, you know, safe and, you know, implementing these medical screenings and practices. We hope, you know, that refugees who have been waiting in, you know, these camps for several years can slowly begin to make their way to the US.
Thank you, Diana. And our last question is about some of the co-sponsorship community engagement programs that we have. And again, COVID has really affected the opportunity for in-person volunteering and for co-sponsorship opportunities. But we are really working hard as an organization and as a group of resettlement agencies to figure out how we can continue to engage volunteers and to support the refugees that are here. It's just like we are feeling a lot of the isolation of not being able to travel and spend time with our friends and family. It's also affecting our refugee clients as job loss and not having access to their language, you know, education, and it really is impacting our refugee brothers and sisters as well. So we are working hard to come up with ways to come around them and encourage our communities to continue to support refugees in these particularly challenging times. So those are all the questions we have. If you guys have more questions, please feel free to reach out to us. Get to our last slide. Yeah, again, we really just want to thank you for joining us for today's webinar. We're really excited to share this new program with you. We're excited to do it again next year and the next year. So we really want to get people excited about this first year and keep coming back. Keep your eye out on your email, on our Facebook page, and on our website. And again, we'll be launching Gather Afghanistan 2020 this Tuesday, September 1st. And both of our toolkits for congregations and communities will be available to download on our website. And if you have friends or family or someone in your congregation who you think would really like to learn more, we will be posting this webinar on our website. So please feel free to share it with other people as well. All right, thank you guys. Take care, stay safe.